The low autumn sun bled across the sky like a dying ember as the wagons rattled toward the twins, wheels creaking through mud, thick with week-shoaled rain. The crossroads smelled of churned earth, sodden leaf rot, and horse sweat, but Eddard Stark, hunched in a gray wool cloak gone threadbare at the hem, let the stench wash over him like a baptism. Silence was his armor now. A generation of northerners had learned to read truth in his eyes, so he kept them lowered and shadowed beneath his hood. The man the realm believed beheaded on the steps of Bellers, Sept, must remain dead a while longer. Beside him rode his eldest son, Robb, kingly even in plain mail, though the direwolf banner was packed beneath crates of salted pork and barley. Robb's gaze flicked over every hedge and hollow with a soldier's wary hunger. He could not know what Ned saw with each careful glance. Lyanna's crypt, Brandon's laughter, the pale face of young Bran staring up at the vaulted Winterfell ceiling. Those ghosts urged Ned forward. Vengeance was for the living, justice for the fallen. He would claim both. At dusk they made camp in a stand of alder where the air tasted of moss and river mist. Torches were forbidden, only the cookie fires were allowed, banked low under iron grates. Catelyn moved among the men with quiet grace, filling trenchers, murmuring thanks. She looked thinner than Ned remembered, hair threaded with silver she had earned while waiting for tidings from King's Landing that never came. When she set a bowl before him, pigeon, oat and onion, her fingers brushed his, and for a heartbeat her eyes widened with all the things they dared not yet speak aloud between them. On the far side of the embers, gray wind prowled, silent as smoke, nose twitching its scents only wolves could name. The beast's flank rippled with muscle beneath shaggy gray fur, and in its yellow eyes Ned glimpsed the old god stirring. He wondered if they too demanded Frey blood. Roose Bolton joined them after the third watch, boots spotless despite the road, his pale eyes reflecting flame. Our riders report Frey sentries at the Bottle Bridge. He spoke as though reading the day's weather. Small folk say Lord Walder boasts of near 2,000 spears within the twins. Robb wiped stew from his chin. Let him boast. Steel speaks louder. Bolton smiled a thin crescent. Steel eye. And secrets. We hold the latter in greater supply. Ned's hand closed around the leather-wrapped hilt of ice. No, not ice. Merely a broad northern bastard blade forged in White Harbor's lesser fires. Ice lay in two great slabs on Joffrey's hip like a pair of tombstones. Yet even this humbler steel felt eager in his grasp. How tight is Frey's watch on his rivers? Loose as a cheap turncloak, said the Blackfish, materializing from the gloom with rainwater dripping off his breastplate. Half his men are boys who have never tasted more than cold rabbit. The rest are old enough to cough up their lungs if they march a mile. Robb lifted a brow. Yet Walder still holds the crossing. Sir Brynden aloud, because the twins hold themselves. Stone keeps faith with no man. Dain. Ned listened, weighing each voice, each fact. But his thoughts churned elsewhere. Tywin Lannister, far to the south beneath Harrenhal's black towers, planning some fresh treachery. The lion's claws reached long. If the twins fell swiftly and the Freys with them, Tywin's talons might be snapped at the knuckle. An old wolf's bite. But bite too hurriedly, and the lion might dance away laughing. That night Ned dreamed of the empty crypts beneath Winterfell. He walked torchless yet saw all. The stone lords of Stark history watching from their alcoves, their dire wolves at their feet. Lyanna stood at the far wall, not stone but living flesh, her hair a tangled storm. "Promise me," she whispered. Ned reached, but the shadows swallowed her, and his hand passed through cold air. When he woke, dawn had not come, and gray wind was staring into the dark, lips peeled from white teeth. They broke camp before sunrise. A chill fog clung to the low country, muting sound, hiding shapes. Small mercies, Ned thought, for beneath the wagon's tarpaulin crouched 6 stout men in river-stained cloaks, each sworn to House Frey. They had been taken quietly on a night patrol, by Bolton's silent sons. Blades pressed gentle at their groins. Their wrists were bound, but their mouths left free. Harma Dogshead, once bannerman to the Crannogman, and now Ned's unlikely co-conspirator, lifted the flap. "Your Grace," she said to Robb. "They'll speak." "They'll shriek," Bolton corrected. "We do not need shrieks. We need maps." Men. One Frey, a youth with patchy whiskers and eyes wide as wren's eggs, blurted, "We ain't sworn to die for old Lord Walder?" "Mercy, my lord." "Mercy is a flower that grows in northern soil," Ned said. "Give us the lay of your walls, the depth of your dungeons, the roster of your watch, and you may yet see summer." Bolton's pale lips curled, amused. The boy poured out everything: hidden posterns, sluice gates, change of guards at moonrise. Ned filed each detail away like new stitches in a tapestry. When the lad faltered, Harma placed a kind, calloused hand on his shoulder. He wept with relief when she promised him hot bread. By mid-morning the army reached the boggy flats fronting the twins. The towers rose ahead, mirror images bound by stone arches high above the green fort. Riverlight flashed off arrow slits. Catelyn's breath caught. Memories of her brother's wedding, her father's laughter, seemed wrapped in those stones, yet she steeled herself. No tears now. A lone rider crossed the causeway, a pale blue pennon flapping overhead. A welcome that offered no warmth. Maester Vyman rode forward to parley, flanked by 2 outriders in half-mail bale. The exchange was brief, little more than ritual courtesy. Frey demanded hostages, Robb demanded guest right, and both sides lied through their teeth. When Vyman returned, his cheeks were red with cold. "Lord Walder grants passage and hearth, though he complains of larders thin as a sparrow's bones." Robb chuckled dark. "His larders will prove ample enough to feed questions and swords." He raised a hand, and the column moved. The river wind cut like a honed blade along the arches. Ned rode just behind the vanguard, counting murder holes, gauging the slant of parapets. Everything mattered. He pictured each corridor as a vein and imagined the lifeblood spilling when the heart was pierced. Yet beneath the grim arithmetic throbbed a gentler ache. He had not set foot in a southern keep since his shame in King's Landing. The stones here seemed to whisper of the gallows. Inside the East Tower's great hall, torches blazed with perfumed tallow. Tapestries of fat Frey brides and forgotten victories drooped along the walls. Walder Frey himself sat crooked upon a chair of bone-white weirwood, skin like parchment over brittle sticks. He blinked at them all, lips working as though tasting each guest's worth. "Bread and salt," he croaked. Servants hurried to deliver trencher loaves and lacquered bowls of salt. Plates clattered, wine splashed. Musicians struck cautious chords. Guest right sealed. But oaths were seeds, Ned knew, sprouting differently in each man's soul. Walder's roots ran shallow, twisted toward coin. Hours passed in ritual feasting. Small beer followed by venison. Venison by cold trout. Trout by 12 different pies. Harps wept gentle over whispered bargains. Robb toasted each Frey lordling until cheeks shone, yet his eyes remained glacier bright. Catelyn laughed with Lady Fairhands, though her fingers drummed a secret code on the chair rail. Bolton disappeared among the shadows of doorways, returning to whisper messages no one heard. Ned sat quiet beside the Blackfish, watching wine-stained linen and truth. At intervals he glanced at the rafters, crossbeams thick as war horses held chain loops for banners or bodies. He noted where torches hung too low, where a hidden archer might perch. Secrets nested everywhere. Near midnight, when bells tolled for the third course of sweetbreads, Robb rose to dance with Rosalind Frey. The girl's smile trembled like candle-eye flame in a draught. Ned studied her. No more than 16, shoulders bird-slender beneath lace. She was innocent of Walder's sins. The old man would trade her virtue like coin, but Ned would not. He would spill only the guilty. Out in the courtyard, snow began to fall, pale ghosts twisting across the torchlight. The smell of it carried Ned home. Pine resin, iron on the air. The broken hush of a winter dawn. He longed for it fiercely, yet he could not return while Tywin Lannister still drew breath. Bolton found him near a shuttered window. "The last of my bastards are within the walls," he murmured. You will have your doors thrown wide when the moon is at its zenith. And our silent sisters, riding from the north gate as we speak." Ned nodded. He felt the weight of what was coming settle upon his shoulders like a frost-laden cloak. Heavy, inevitable, cold. No innocence, Lord Bolton. Men, women, or children. Bolton's voice did not change. "In war the lines blur, then sharpen them," Ned said. "I will not be the butcher Lord Tywin believes me." Bolton dipped his head. Deference or mockery, impossible to tell. The zenith neared. Sleepers found their pallets. Drunks were hauled to straw nests. Musicians dozed over slack strings. Only guards moved in silent circuits, boots whispering on rushes. Ned walked the halls unchallenged, another gray shadow among many, until he reached the kitchen yard. There he crouched beside barrels of grease and tar. He pressed a gloved finger to the pitch, thick, sticky, perfect for fire. Above, a lone raven clacked its beak on the parapet. Ned met its onyx eyes, and wondered if the three-eyed crow watched now, moving men upon his board. Perhaps. He cared little for prophecy. Justice required mortal hands. Atop the western battlements, hidden behind crenellations, Arya Stark lay on her belly, breath white in the frigid dark. Needle's slender length glimmered faintly beneath a strip of black cloth that bound her hair. She was smaller than the longbow slung across her back, yet when her gray eyes aligned with the distant hall windows, Ned's heart jolted. His little girl wielded death as easily as lies. He had forbidden her involvement. She had laughed. "I've lain with wolves," she said, "and danced with faceless shadows. I won't sit out father's war." Catelyn wept at first, then armed her. Now Arya's arrow, fletched in direwolf fur, rested against a string drawn soft as breath. Waiting, Bolton's men oiled the hinges of servant doors. Blackfish tightened the straps on his brigandine. Harma Dogshead gathered the Crannog bog skulkers along the cellar steps, each bearing a cudgel carved from drowned heartwood. At the great halls, Deus Walder Frey snored, drool glistening in his beard. The hall was dim, lit by a score of guttering torches, their flames swallowing what little scent the feasting left behind. Shapes sprawled across benches, Freys and Northmen alike. Peace seemed to hum in the timbers. A bell began to toll. 1, 2, 3. The zenith. Doors groaned. Wind howled through high slits. Snuffing torches in a cascade of darkness. Walder jerked awake, blinking into night. "What?" Arya loosed her arrow. It found the throat of Sir Aenys Frey, pinning him to a wine cask before his shout was born. Silence held for half a heartbeat, then shattered under the roar of gray wind barreling through the doors like a storm of fur and fang. Men screamed. Steel rang dotch. Fires blossomed where tar met torch. Ned advanced through the chaos, as though wading a dark river. His blade whispered from its sheath and tasted the first fray. A guard scrabbling to pull up his mail. Blood steamed upon the stones. Robb vaulted a table, cutting a path toward the dais, where Walder shrank behind twin grandsons clutching silver-edged spears. Bolton's crimson-armored bastards surged from the kitchens, knives curved like smiles. They moved without cries. The only sound the wet thud of blades finding meat. Ned watched them slice down a bard, and his stomach twisted. But the choice had been made when the Lannisters sent heads in boxes north. Across the hall, Catelyn wrestled a crossbow from Ser Hosteen, butt-smashing teeth. She did not see the Frey archer atop the balcony lining her up. Yet Arya did. Another arrow hummed. Another life ended. Flames climbed draperies, brightening the slaughter in lurid oranges and blues. Smoke writhed. Ned's lungs burned. Yet the Freys fought poorly, half-armored, mostly drunk. Men slipped on greasy marble and were trampled. Panic was allied to the wolf this night. Walder Frey's chair toppled as Robb vaulted upon the dais. His sword, red as dawn, knocked aside defending spears. He seized the old man by his collar and dragged him to kneel on the edge of the platform. "For gray wind," he snarled. "For my mother's tears, for every broken oath." The sword flashed. Ned was there in an instant, catching Robb's wrist. "No." His voice cut through clamor like a horn call. We are Starks. He dies by sentence, not rage. Mend. Robb's chest heaved, sweat silver on his brow. Slowly he lowered the blade. Walder quaked, voiding himself. The stink mingled with smoke. From the archway leading to the river tower came a bellow. Sir Ryman Frey, plate gleaming, banner in fist, 24 men hard at his heels. Ned shoved Walder behind Catelyn and met the charge beside his son. Sword on shield, shield on bone, the hall rang again. Ned's arm numbed with each impact, but he abandoned caution, pushing forward like a wolf through snowdrifts. Ryman's great helm split under Robb's backhand. The man toppled. Grey wind tore out his throat, fur streaked crimson. The remaining Freys broke, fleeing into smoke-filled corridors where Bolton's knives waited. Some leapt from windows into black river waters and vanished. Others surrendered, palms skyward, trembling. The battle for the hall ended in the space of 20 heartbeats. Yet outside, across the bridge, the second tower had roused. Horns brayed. Lanterns flickered along parapets. Ned pressed a cloth to a cut beneath his ribs, breath harsh. Blackfish, take 2 score. Secure the parapets before they turn the balliste on us. Bender. Brynden Tully saluted, eyes bright as a boy's. Ace the old god's will. He vanished under the archway, banners streaming behind. Robb wiped his sword on a corpse cloak. Father, weave the fortress. Tywin will know by raven come dawn. Then dawn must find him bereft of allies. Ned stared through the shattered doors to where torches bobbed like fireflies on the distant King's Road. Walder's oaths bought Tywin time. We have stolen that. Now we claim the rest. Behind them, Walder Frey whimpered amid the wreckage of his hall. Alive for now. Catelyn bound his hands. Arya descended from the balcony, cheeks streaked with soot, eyes alight. She was no child tonight. Bolton approached, bowing slightly. The dungeons yield 30 Lannister men hot harms. Shall we send their heads to Harrenhal? Not yet. Ned looked to the roof, imagining ravens bearing tidings in every direction. Tywin must be lured, not warned. We bait the trap with hope, not grief. Bolton's smile thinned. Hope is short supply, Lord Stark. Then we shall forge it. Snow swirled in through a burst window, scattering cinders across bloody slick stone. Ned lifted his eyes to the flake-strewn ceiling, to the darkness beyond, vast as winter itself, and felt the weight begin to ease. One tower had fallen. Another remained. Tywin's heart still beat somewhere south. The night was far from over, but a new chapter had begun, written in steel and flame. Outside, the green fork hissed beneath drifting embers. Wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and distant frost. Winter was coming, and with it, the reckoning. The next hours blurred into a tapestry of motion. Banners lowered, gates flung wide, wounded hauled to makeshift infirmaries under flickering torches. Maester Vyman's raven quills scratched tirelessly, sending coded missives north and east and south. Ned stood in Walder Frey's solar, now commandeered, studying a map weighted by daggers at its corners. Symbols, direwolves, trouts, flayed men, clustered like storm clouds around the neck of the riverlands. Roose Bolton leaned over the table. Clegane is rumored near Derry with 200 outriders. Sir Adam Marbrand marches from the Golden Tooth. Then, let them, Ned said. The twins bar their passage, and soon Tywin will answer a summons he cannot refuse. The summons lay before him, a fresh parchment bearing Walder Frey's shaky seal. It invited Lord Tywin to claim guest right at a feast, celebrating renewed alliance with House Stark. False words penned at sword point. Tywin's spies would smell rot, but pride would demand he attend or appear weak. And pride, Ned knew, was the lion's greatest blind spot. Bolton traced a finger along the King's Road. If he rides fast, he could reach us in 5 days. We fortify in 4, Ned answered. Then we fence the lion. Robb entered, cheeks ruddy from cold. Half the Frey levies have bent the knee. The rest are prisoners. Edmure's men hold the bridge. Ned clasped his son's shoulder. Well done. Robb's voice softened. Mother says the gods would hear is small, but the heart tree stands. She wants us to kneel before it. Says the old gods should witness what comes. We will, at first light. Robb's eyes searched his father's face. Do you ever doubt this path? Every moment, Ned admitted. But I doubt the cost of inaction more. Robb nodded, jaw set. When dawn seeped gray through arrow slits, father and son stood beneath a slender weirwood whose red leaves trembled in the river breeze. The tree's face, carved by an unknown hand centuries ago, wept sock tears. Ned laid Ice's humbler cousin across the roots. Old gods, he whispered, watch over the innocent. Guide my hand against the guilty. Let winter judge us all. Robb echoed him, voice rough with feeling. A soft wind replied, rustling crimson leaves, like the hushed applause of unseen witnesses. Back in the solar, Arya lounged atop Walder Frey's writing desk, swinging her legs. Do we really make peace with the Boltons? She asked. We make necessity, Ned said. Peace comes later. Peace is knives sheathed, Arya countered. Knives draw rust. She grinned a wolfish grin. Ned ruffled her hair, and for a moment, remembered the girl who chased cats through Red Keep tunnels. She was still there, buried under scars and shadows, and he vowed she would see dawns unmarred by blood. Eventually, 2 days later, the first Lannister outriders tested the causeway, gilded helms flashing like midday suns. Arrows drove them back. Ned allowed one man to escape with tales of direwolves stalking the towers and Freys nailed to gateposts. Fear galloped faster than ravens. Inside the armory, Edmure and the Blackfish drilled fresh Frey converts. River knights who stammered oaths to house Stark while clutching spears that shook in their fists. Catelyn oversaw rationing. Roose counted crossbow quarrels. Harma Dogshead patrolled cellars ripe with captured Dornish wine. Even Sansa, rescued from King's Landing by very charlatan sailors months prior, worked at the infirmary, rinsing wounds and singing soft over fevered men. Her voice stitched hope through stone walls. 5 nights after the reversal, torches blossomed along the southern horizon. An army approached, ranks ordered, banners snapping. The Lion, at last. Ned stood upon the parapet, snowflakes melting on his gauntlets. Below, the green fork churned, swollen with winter melt. Gray wind paced at his side, hackles rippling. Robb joined him, face calm. Tywin comes, he said. Ned's breath plumed. Let the Lion cross the bridge, he murmured. And may the old gods grant us courage to close it behind him. He touched the pommel of his sword, feeling the cold bite of steel, and in that instant knew the path ahead. Fire on water, screams echoing through night, and after, all things reborn in frost and ash. But first, the crossing, and the reckoning at the Twins, and the end of a grip that had chained the realm too long. Snow fell harder, cloaking the battlefield in silent white, as though winter itself wished to muffle the roar about to begin. Ned Stark whispered one final prayer, not for victory, but for the strength to pay its price. The river answered with a hiss, cold and unforgiving. Somewhere beyond the blind hush of snow, a lion roared. Oh, Kai. The snow fell thick and unbroken for 3 nights and 2 days, muffling the world beyond the high curtain walls of the Twins. By the 4th dawn, the drifts along the outer battlements rose to a man's waist, and the air inside every stone corridor prickled with hoarfrost that sighed loose in white wisps as soldiers passed by. Lanterns had to be trimmed twice as often, else their flames would gutter to coals in the cold. Ned Stark took these omens with the silent gravity of a farmer gauging whether seed should be sown or saved for leaner seasons. Winter itself, it seemed, had chosen to stand sentry beside his family's vengeance. Tywin Lannister chose to test that sentry at midday. First came the Outriders, a pair of horsemen in gilded half-helms, their crimson cloaks stiff with rime. From the southeast causeway they advanced at a wary trot through powdery drifts, hooves crunching like breaking bones. Ned watched them from the west tower archery loft, the great river yawning black and slow beneath the arches. Beside him, Arya held her breath so tightly he feared she would faint. The men rode within easy bowshot, then reined in and waited. A signal that the Lord of Casterly Rock had arrived in force behind them. Ned's reply was measured. He lifted 2 fingers. The tower bells rang once, then twice. Below, the portcullis of the eastern gate creaked apart exactly 6 feet. Far too narrow for a rider to pass, just wide enough for a single man on foot. Into that thin opening stepped Robb Stark, clad in plain gray wool, beneath a heavy direwolf cloak. No crown, no gilded armor, only ice in his eyes. The riders conversed in low tones Ned could not make out. Then one dismounted and approached on foot across the wind-scraped stones of the bridge, head down against the gale. Robb waited until the man was 4 paces away before speaking. No one else heard what passed between King in the north and Lannister messenger. Ned only saw Robb's shoulders shift. His hand settled briefly on the leather-wrapped hilt at his hip. Then the emissary returned to his horse, mounted, and cantered south again. An hour passed beneath a sky as white as bleached bone. At its end the bells tolled thrice without Ned's command. Tywin approached. From the river flats rolled forth a wedge of knights in full plate, chased with beaten gold. Their polished helms hammered into snarling lion faces. Standards of crimson and gold snapped overhead, each bearing the crowned lion of the rock. Behind that glittering vanguard trudged men-at-arms in scale brigandine, archers in studded leather, sappers in thick wool with picks and shovels slung across their backs. Wagons groaned under barrels of salt pork and ton after ton of arbor red. At their center, beneath a pavilion canopy borne by 6 halberdiers, rode Tywin himself. The old lion wore no crown. His power was its own regalia. Silver gold hair cut close as if by a razor of discipline, face a sculpted mask of seasoned disdain. He seemed carved from frost and arrogance alike. He did not glance upward, yet Ned felt the weight of the man's presence through 30 yards of frigid air. The Lannister host halted an arrow's length from the bridge. Tywin signaled with a casual flick of 2 fingers. His standard-bearer advanced, planting the lion banner square before the stone arch. Then Tywin rode forward alone under the canopy toward the narrow gate gap. Dang. Robb waited once more where he had stood before, porter chains rattling overhead. At 10 paces, Tywin dismounted, handing his reins to a groom without a glance. The 2 enemies regarded one another across crimson-stained snow. "Lord Stark," Tywin said, voice level as poured lead. "Lord Lannister, so young to bear so many titles." Tywin's breath misted from thin lips. "King, if rumor be true. Conqueror of Riverrun, breaker of oaths. And of bridges, apparently." Robb met that chill gaze without a blink. "Rumor speaks sideways. We mend bridges today." "Indeed." Tywin's pale green eyes flicked to the portcullis. "You offer me guest right amid the same stones that recently drank Frey blood. Guest right. Bread and salt for every man under your banner. You, your captains, your heralds. And thou. No more." It was not a question. No fewer. Robb offered the ghost of a smile. "You may leave 20,000 swords camped beneath our walls, Lord Tywin. They will keep each other warm. But for the feast we invite 100 souls, no more? No fewer?" Tywin considered. Ned swore he saw the man's mind measure weight, angle, leverage. Finally, the lion dipped his head by a fraction. "So be it. 100. At sunset." "Sunset," Robb confirmed. "And one more." Tywin's gaze sharpened. "My son." Robb's smile vanished. "The Kingslayer rots in Riverrun's deepest cell, by his own choices. Then perhaps we negotiate after the feast." Tywin pivoted, remounted, and signaled his captains. The Lannister host began erecting pavilions of scarlet silk and driving stakes into the frozen earth. Like a blooming field of poppies, Ned thought, stunning in color yet fatal to cattle. Robb returned through the gates. When he reached the courtyard, gray wind broke from a kennel arch to circle him, muzzle bumping his thigh. Robb scratched between the direwolf's ears, but his eyes remained on nothing. Ned descended the stair to meet his son. "He will come," Ned said. "He will test every word," Robb replied. "And he will try to break them. We must bend before he does." Ned gripped Rob's shoulder. Walk soft. Strike hard. House Stark survives on that. Since long before dragons flew, they convened in the Solar with Bolton, Blackfish, Catelyn, and Harma Dogshead. A slate tile warmed over embers served as their council table. Parchment maps curled in the dry heat. Lines of colored cord marked escape tunnels, ambush alleys, gatehouse vent shafts. Bolton indicated 3 sets of red dots at the corners of the great feast hall, his hidden archers. Blackfish moved a cluster of blue pins representing Riverland's bowmen along the rafters. Catelyn slid white stones, healers and septons, into an alcove far from any kill zone, determined to spare the innocent. Harma produced a pouch of gray dust. Tansy root and oleander, she drawled. Blown into a man's face, it blinds him. Poured in wine, it stops his heart inside of 10 beats. Man, we are wolves, not assassins. Catelyn objected. We are survivors, Harma countered. So are the Freys. They tried poison first. Ned raised his palm. No oleander. If Tywin dies, it will be at sword's edge, beneath the witness of the old gods and guest right's lawful undoing. Otherwise, we are no better. Bolton's eyes glittered. We are already better, Lord Stark. We keep our word. Ned agreed. And that is why he will trust this feast enough to enter. They rehearsed the signals. 3 notes on a curved hunting horn meant archers asleep. 5 meant Lannister trap. 7 told every hidden Northman to strike. Arya alone had license to ignore counts. Her arrows would speak for her. By late afternoon, the twins' kitchens roiled like forges. Cauldrons of beef barley bubbled beside shallow pails of vinegar to scour cleavers and hands. Sansa and 2 Frey girls stripped threaded fowl for broth while humming a lament older than Egan's Landing. In the yard, a boar the size of a pony turned on an iron spit, ribs popping audibly as hot fat dripped into the snow, sizzling. Lannister envoys tasted each dish in view of Bolton's guards and found no trace of oleander. They demanded an entire cask of wine be opened and poured into crystal carafes hours before the feast. They wanted to examine the sediment. Ned allowed it without quarrel. Trust was a blade. Keep it visible, but never hand it away. Sunset leaked crimson and violet across the clouds. Torches were lit, braziers packed with charcoal, rushes sprinkled with pine resin to lend fragrance over the lingering scent of butchered Frey men. At the first limping note of a horn, Tywin returned, this time at the head of a column 100 strong. Bannermen, captains, a gaunt septon, and 3 lion-liveried bards, whose ivory harps glinted beneath horn lanterns. 2 armored litters followed at the rear, each drawn by a team of dun geldings. Within sat casks of sweet Myrish firewine and, perhaps, some hidden malignancy. The gates swung open full width. Catelyn and Ned stood upon the steps of the inner courtyard, a wide silver salver between them bearing a notched crust loaf and a bowl of coarse salt. Tywin dismounted again and placed his mailed hands upon the bread. He tore a fragment with deliberate care, dipped it, and placed it upon his tongue. His captains followed suit, each performing the ancient ritual beneath Ned's direct gaze. Guest right is sworn, Ned declared, voice carrying above the snow-muffled hush. Enter freely and share our table. Tywin's mouth curved in something almost like respect. Freely. He gestured, and his contingent flowed past him into the keep like molten bronze. Inside, the great hall had been scrubbed clean of last week's gore. Fresh rushes perfumed with mint and rosemary carpeted the flagstones. Tapestries depicting the children of the forest and the building of the wall had been fetched from storage to cover charred beams where draperies had burned. Long trestle tables brimmed with crusty oat loaves, smoked eel, spiced mutton, lanterns reflected in thousands of wine goblets set like tiny suns down every board. Tywin's men peeled off vambraces and helms, hanging them on pegs just outside the threshold. Robb Stark greeted each Lannister captain by name. Mace of the White Hearth, Sir Kevin II. Adam Marbrand clad in a bear-pelt mantle. Sir Flemont Brax with his twisted silver necklaces, then directed them to benches according to rank. Nobles near the dais. Sergeants farther down, camp smiths and messengers at the foot. Ned joined Tywin at the head table. They sat not an arm's length apart, flanked by Catelyn and Roose on Ned's side, by Adam Marbrand and Parcell's lean understudy Maester Crelin on Tywin's. Between them was set a wooden box inlaid with weirwood and ebony, its lid carved into a snarling direwolf chasing a lion whose tail wrapped back to the wolf's jaws. It was locked. The single iron key lay in Ned's pocket. Tywin looked at the box only once, then ignored it, yet both men understood. Inside were the terms for Jaime's release, a treaty of ice and gold, written in 2 identical scripts by Sansa's fair hand. Music swelled as boar was served, pink flesh fragrant with juniper and pepper. Tywin ate sparingly, though he complimented the marbling. Robb drank sparingly, though he toasted Casterly Rock's prosperity. Ned spoke seldom, letting the room's mood thrum unchecked. Men swapped jests, found common ground in winters survived, in tourneys witnessed, in the confounding pleasures of Dornish women. Gold and gray intermingled like melted solder. Cups refilled each other. Haunches passed freely over house lines. Guessed right at work, binding, lulling. Above, Arya stalked the rafters on quiet feet. One hand always on needle, the other holding 3 wolf-fletched arrows. At the end of the second course, Tywin dabbed his lips and turned to Ned. "Sir Jaime." Ned produced the key and laid it atop the wolf-lion box. "In Riverrun, alive. Unmaimed. Free him. When the ink dries on signatures." Tywin's gaze flicked left. Robb set down his cup and nodded once. It was no secret. Jaime's life for peace. But peace came at a price measured in more than blood. Catelyn leaned in. "Swear to withdraw your banners from the Riverlands and the North. Renounce claim to Ned's head. In writing. Ben Dwayne." Tywin's nostrils flared, drawing in the scent of boar and juniper. Perhaps of victory or defeat. "And the boy, on the throne?" "Joffrey's rule ends at the neck," Ned said. "North of Moat Cailin is ours. South is his to argue with Stannis." Stannis. An unmistakable curl of contempt ghosted Tywin's voice. "The realm teeters on rebellion, and you would hack away its spine." "You did that," Ned replied. "The day you murdered children and called it mercy." A hush settled between them, fragile as hoarfrost on candle wicks. Robb broke it, standing to raise his goblet. "To the wolves of winter and the lions of autumn. May both find a spring." Lannister captains echoed politely. Stark men pounded table edges. Someone laughed too loudly, wine sloshed. Outside, the 7th bell pealed, exactly as rehearsed, yet easily lost amid music. Arya's arrow slid from its quiver, knocked to string. Her every heartbeat counted off the next steps. On the floor, Bolton's bastards drifted like crimson petals among benches, refilling cups. Each wore a dagger sheathed underside their serving trays. Harma Dogshead, disguised as a Frey scullion, moved behind Marbrand, scattering walnuts on his trenchers. Tywin lifted his goblet to taste sweet, myrish firewine. Ned watched as the lion's wrist brushed the table edge. A tiny clink. For an instant, Ned's throat tightened at the thought of a drop of oleander, or some other invisible venom, lingering in that vintage. But no, their plan required Tywin alive. Poison belonged to Frey's and cowards' work. Yet Tywin set down his cup untouched. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly upon the rim, then drifted over the hall, pupil to pupil, banner to banner. Ned felt it before seeing. The sudden hush of wind outside, the way torches shifted in a draft from the northern arrow loops. The portcullis chain was rattling, a signal unsent, unauthorized. Bolton's gaze snapped to Ned. His lips barely moved, unplanned. Ned's palm tightened around his knife. 3 notes from a horn burst through the din. Sleepers alert. Wrong. The watchman should have sounded only upon Bolton's order. Blackfish half rose, hand to sword. Caitlin paled. Then, like lightning splitting oaken heartwood, the feast hall's main doors slammed wide. Snow gusted across the floor in a swirling sheet. Through it strode a man clad head to toe in sable steel, helm shaped like a hound's snarling maw, flanked by 24 riders in amalgam plate, bearing no livery save mud. The hound himself, Sandor Clegane, towered at their head, cloak whipping behind him. Tywin rose, triumph burning in his ice-green eyes. "My strays return," he declared. "Lord Stark, your gates are generous." Ned's mind raced. Clegane's company was counted among Tywin's outriders, true, but Bolton scouts reported them days south. The horn signal, they must have overwhelmed Ned's watch at the North Gate stealthily, then forced the sentry to call false safety code. Clegane halted before the dais, helm still on. Black tongue of smoke curling from the mouth grill. He had ridden hard from camp, perhaps through burning field braziers. He removed his gauntlet, revealing bandaged fingers, and set it upon the floor with a clang. "Pay me, and I'll be gone," he growled, voice harsh as gravel under boot. "Stay," Tywin countered. "Share bread. Share salt." "I spit on salt." Clegane's burned cheek twitched. "I want coin." "Coin," Robb echoed coldly. "For what service?" "Killing phrase." The hound spat. "They squeal like stuck pigs." He unslung a burlap sack and upended it. 3 severed heads, Freys from the Northern Watch, hudded wetly onto the rushes, rolling until one lodged against a Lannister captain's boot. Gasps rippled through the hall. Harps fell silent. Tywin chuckled, a sound like steel scraping inside a crypt. "The dog bites any hand that feeds him but never lacks appetite." He gestured. "A purse for his trouble." A Lannister steward advanced with a heavy pouch, jingling gold lions. Clegane snatched it, weighed it in his palm, then tossed it directly at Robb Stark's feet. "Blood money from lions stinks worse than pig shit," he snarled. "Pay me in honest steel." Robb's hand moved to his sword. Tywin's palm went flat on the table. "Enough," the Lion Lord commanded. "We feast." Clegane's helm turned slowly toward Ned. Through the black slits, Ned saw raw fury, and something else. Maybe disgust, maybe the ragged edge of a conscience. The hound hated knights, hated lions, and perhaps hated wolves too. Chaos incarnate. Bolton slipped from Ned's side into the shadows at the hall's edge. Blackfish tracked him, but Ned raised 2 fingers. Let the leech do his work. Tywin reclaimed his seat, smoothing his doublet cuffs. A dog's theatrics, nothing more. He regarded the wolf-lion box anew, then the key. "Shall we open it?" "After dessert," Ned answered. Tywin inclined his head. "Then bring dessert." Servants hurried to obey, lugging in silver trays stacked with frosted lemon cakes, sugared plums, honey-drizzled custards. Sansa guided 3 scullions bearing a towering ginger cake, shaped like a direwolf chasing a lion, in spun sugar. Cheers erupted from drunker men. The mood shifted on a hair. From tension to wonder, to something quite close to joy in the alchemy of sugar and spectacle. Tywin watched the cake approach, as though it were a siege tower. His fingers rhythmically tapped the table. At that moment, a crossbow bolt hissed from the western gallery, and thunked into a pillar 6 inches from Tywin's ear. The old lion did not flinch. He merely looked up. On the balcony, a Lannister archer swayed, a dagger protruding from his gut. One of Bolton's bastards had found a spy. Riverlord archers grappled the guardrails, wrestling with 2 more infiltrators. The hall erupted. Men grabbed wine flasks as bludgeons, swords scraped free of scabbards, benches overturned. Green and red erupted into riot. Bolton's knife had opened the lion's belly wide but too soon. Ned cursed. He whistled. Shrill, once, twice. Every Northman heard. Then he reached for Ice's cousin's sword. Tywin stood, voice cutting through din like a whip crack. "Hold." Astonishingly, dozens obeyed. Even some Starks froze. Swords half raised. The Lion Lord's authority, honed from decades, forged of ruthlessness, spanned feuds. "Enough games," Tywin said. "Open the box, Stark." Ned drew the key. For a heartbeat, he considered snapping it in half, ending the charade. But the wolf must lure the lion deeper into winter. He slipped the key into the lock. Tumblers clicked. The lid rose. Inside lay 2 parchments rolled and bound in scarlet ribbon, and beneath them, a single dirk forged in Valyrian steel. The cat's paw blade once meant for Bran Stark. Ned had reclaimed it in silent theft from King's Landing before his flight. Now it awaited final judgment. Tywin's brows arched. Symbolic, yet unsubtle, Ned removed the parchments. One bore the seal of Winterfell, the other of Riverrun. "Sign," he said. "Take your son. Leave our lands." "Not yet." Tywin reached into the box and lifted the dirk, weighing its dark ripples. "One stipulation. Riverrun opens its dungeons long enough for me to speak with Jaime. Privately. No. Non-negotiable." Tywin set the blade down. Robb spoke quietly. "Privately, yet within hearing of Stark men." "That," Tywin said, "would be a negation of privacy." Robb glanced at Ned. Ned nodded ever so slightly. 10 minutes, Robb offered. 1 guard outside the door. No blades. Agreed. Tywin produced a quill and signed both documents, one after another, his strokes smooth as silk, even as chaos churned behind him. Ned's quill followed. Their names bled side by side upon parchment, ice and gold intertwined by law. Bolton emerged again, gloved hands speckled with blood not his own. "The galleries are secure. Spies removed." He eyed Tywin but addressed Ned. "No more accidents tonight." "We shall see," Tywin murmured, sipping his wine at last. "Guest right protects us until dawn. Enjoy your reprieve, Lord Stark." Ned tasted copper behind his teeth. "And you yours." As midnight loomed, guards escorted Tywin and a handful of retainers to chambers overlooking the river. By tradition, the highest windows belonged to honored guests. Guards of mixed livery lined hallways, torches sizzling in freezing drafts. Arya shadowed the procession across roof beams, silent as an owl. When Tywin's door closed, Bolton's best galler barred it from without. In the yard below, gray wind circled restlessly. Sansa and Catelyn tended wounded men in the frosted cloisters. Lannister captains bedded down in stables, arrayed with fresh straw, keeping them under watch, yet under guest right. Ned stood above it all upon the silent ramparts, watching moonlight fracture across the ice-flecked river. A direwolf howled once in the far distance, lonely, prophetic. Blackfish joined him. "I mislike this quiet, Ned." "It is a blade poised on a hair," Ned agreed. "But come dawn, guest right ends. And then House Stark renders judgment." The older knight drew his cloak tight against the biting wind. "Whatever tomorrow brings," he said, "I am glad Brynden Tully stands the watch beside Eddard Stark." Ned clasped his uncle by the forearm. "And you." Inside the tower hearth, logs popped. On a small traveling table lay 2 signed parchments still damp with ink. Beside them glimmered the Valyrian dirk, black glass veins swallowing firelight. Ned regarded the blade a long moment. It had nearly taken his son's life years ago. Now it waited for justice, perhaps grander than any court. He wrapped it in oiled cloth and slid it through his belt. Across the causeway, Lannister bonfires painted wavering silhouettes on tent walls, soldiers sharpening swords, smiths mending armor, a bard plucking a soft dirge for homes forgotten. Tywin's main host numbered near 20,000, camped in rows of disciplined order. Their catapults sat draped against snow like dormant beasts. Their siege towers lay dismantled, but ready. Yet beyond the reach of those fires, hidden among willow stands and cut banks slick with ice, lurked Ned's other allies, clansmen from the Mountains of the Moon sworn to House Stark for stolen grain packets, 100 spearwives fresh from Skagos, led by the woman called Crow's Ghost, and the black-clad figures of 4 sworn brothers, newly deserted from the Night's Watch with grim tidings. The others stirred. But that was Dawn's worry. Bolton found Ned again before the cock's first crow. "The hound is gone," he whispered. "Rode out the north gate under 3 banners, none ours." "Let him run," Ned said. "Dogs rarely hunt the same scent twice." Bolton's pale eyes gleamed. "It is not the dog I fear, but the quarry who set him free." Ned frowned but said nothing. An hour before dawn, Maester Vyman's rook pierced the quiet with a single note. A lone raven from River Run had arrived. Ned broke the wax. It bore Sir Brynden Tully's mark, though the man stood beside him. Strange. The parchment inside contained 5 words, scrawled in Sansa's practiced hand. Kingslayer loosed. Dungeons breached. Danderol. Ned's heart slammed against his ribs. Jaime's cell. Breached. By whom? How long ago? How far could the Kingslayer ride unfettered? Tywin's request for privacy. No blades, 10 minutes. A ruse inside a ruse. Bolton read over his shoulder. "He's here," the leech murmured. Ned spun, mind racing. Tywin in his locked chamber, unaccounted for hours. Jaime perhaps disguised, perhaps already inside these walls, perhaps about to. From the east tower erupted a muffled roar, then shouts, clash of steel, screams. The door of Ned's solar banged open. Arya tumbled in, eyes wide. "Jaime Lannister." She gasped, with gold-cloaked Sellswords. "He's freed his father. They're cutting through halls." A thunderous crash shook the tower. Dust rained from rafters. Bolton drew his sword. Ned shoved Arya behind him. Outside, horns blared, not in planned patterns, but wild, dissonant. Robb's shout echoed across stone. To arms! Winter had given them one night of uneasy peace. Dawn would bleed red. Ned Stark stepped into the corridor, blade singing from its sheath, and felt the old god stir once more in the marrow of the ancient stones. The true Red Wedding, its reversal incomplete, awaited, and the lion, unleashed, roared inside the walls. Ah, Kay. The clash began like a howl caught too long in a wolf's throat. One jagged note that broke into a frenzy of steel and screaming through every corridor of the East Tower. Ned Stark ran toward it with Arya, a half-pace behind, her shorter legs pounding flagstones slick with frost. A crimson and gold cloaked sellsword swung wide from a side passage. Ned turned his body, let the slash hiss over his cloak's hem, and drove his sword straight through the man's gorget. The impact rang up his arm, jarred his teeth. He kicked the corpse clear and kept moving. Ahead, torchlight bucked and shuddered at the stairwell mouth. A bearded Northman staggered backward into view, clutching the stump of an elbow. A Lannister sergeant bounded after him, blade raised for the killing stroke. Needle flashed. Arya's lunge opened the sergeant from groin to navel. Guts slid free in a sound wetter than surf. The girl did not pause to watch him fall. Down 2 flights the melee thickened. The ancient timbers of the tower groaned under the weight of a dozen separate skirmishes. Shields hammered against spear points, axes bit door frames. Men snarled curses garbled in half-frozen breath. Ned saw Robb near the main arch landing, Grey Wind beside him, both spattered with blood so fresh it steamed. They were pressed hard. Robb parried a thrust from Sir Flement Brax, pivoted, countercut. Grey Wind hamstrung another lion before barrels of hard cider, cracking staves and sending amber froth sluicing across the floor. Ned slid behind Brax's blind side and thrust upward beneath the man's armhole. Brax spasmed, sword clattering. Robb nodded once, already turning to meet 3 more assailants spilling from the servants' stairs. "Jaime's for me," he called, voice hoarse with effort. "Find Father Lannister." Bolton appeared through smoke, wreathing the corridor, face calm, pale eyes bright, longsword dripping. "The old wolf is mine," he murmured to Ned. "Jaime and Robb will dance. Keep the girls safe." Arya Flash smiled, then vanished into a crawlspace, will-the-wisp quick. Ned pushed through the tumult, following Bolton toward Tywin's suite. Tywin Lannister stalked the antechamber with bare sword and an iron calm that belied the pandemonium outside. Jaime stood opposite, stripped of his earlier disguise, gold hair matted, eyes fevered with the taste of freedom. No guards flanked them now. Those few Sellswords Clegane had smuggled in lay dead in the hall. The Hound himself long gone to his own uncertain roads. "Time," Jaime said, pacing. "If Robb reaches us—" "He will," Tywin cut in. "Hold the threshold. I handle Stark." "Why? You can barely lift that blade, father." Tywin's mouth tightened. "I lift kingdoms. One wolf is lighter." Heavy boots hammered nearer. The oak door shuddered. Jaime planted himself square, longsword poised. Then the hinges screamed and the door burst. Roose Bolton ducked beneath the splintered timber first. Silent, lethal, followed by Ned. Jaime lunged. 2 strokes rang, bright sparking flashes in torchlight. Bolton slithered around them, eyes fixed on Tywin, who simply waited. Point angled low like a poised scorpion's tail. Ned circled, measuring the Lion Lord. "You've no armor," he said, voice echoing against stone thick with chill. "Yield." "My house does not yield," Tywin answered. "Least of all to ghosts." Their swords met. Ned felt at once the old lion's strength, lesser than before but anchored in absolute will. They traded 10 cuts in darkness, broken only by Bolton's specter prowling for an opening. Jaime drove Ned aside with a brutal bind, pivoted, and crashed into Roose's guard. Valyrian steel hissed as Bolton parried, stepped left, and opened Jaime from cheek to collar. Blood spurted black on his golden surcoat. Jaime howled, reversed, but Bolton vanished, reappearing behind Tywin. Steel flashed. Ned shouted a warning, too late. The Flayer Lord's sword thrust for Tywin's spine. At the last instant, Jaime threw himself sideways, intercepting the strike. Blade bit golden plate, glanced, and sheared half the Kingslayer's pauldron. Jaime staggered, cursing. Tywin seized opportunity, pivoting on Bolton with a serpentine riposte. Bolton's armor squealed, red splashed. He stumbled. First time Ned had seen the leech bleed. Ned took 3 rapid strides, hammered Tywin's guard, forced separation. Bolton retreated, hand clamping his flank. Behind them, Arya slipped through a slitted wall panel, smoky silhouette ghosting across Tywin's peripheral vision. Her bow was gone, lost perhaps in the avalanche of combat. Needle gleamed in one fist instead. "Run, girl," Ned gasped. She shook her head, gray eyes bright. Jaime lunged again, sloppy with pain. Ned parried, riposte struck sparks off Jaime's breastplate. Gold cloak, blood darkened. Jaime's foot skidded and spilled wine. He compensated with preternatural reflex, but Bolton stepped in and punched a rondel dagger beneath Jaime's chin up into his mouth. Sound like a butchered stag. Jaime's sword dropped, clanging. He sagged forward. Bolton twisted, wrenched free, and the Kingslayer collapsed in a rattle of failing breath. Silence cracked only by torch hiss and distant battle clang. Tywin's eyes flicked to his son, blinked once, and something flickered there. An ember of humanity, almost burning grief, almost. Then it was gone. He advanced. Fury channeled into lethal precision. Bolton blocked, unbalanced. Tywin's blade drew a red line across Bolton's brow. Roose fell against a tapestry, gasping. Arya moved before Ned could forbid it. She darted low, spinning past Tywin's cut to jab needle into the meat behind his left knee. Tywin hissed. His sword point dropped, slashed reflexively. Ned wrenched Arya free just in time. Steel whistled past her braid and rang against the wall. Tywin hobbled backward, blood already soaking woolen hose. Ned advanced. Sensing finality, the lion barred his teeth. No longer mask but raw bone-deep defiance. Ned let duty guide his wrists. 3 cuts. Feint high, slice mid, thrust center. Tywin parried the high, dodged the slice, but Ice's humbler cousin punched through ribs above the heart. Steel grated, met resistance, seated. Tywin Lannister exhaled once. Fog white, lips shaping words only gods could hear. His sword slid from numb fingers. Ned withdrew the blade. Tywin crumpled, kneeling first like a man at prayer, then face first onto rush-strewn boards beside Jaime's twitching corpse. Snow-cold air rushed in from a shattered window lattice. It fluttered Tywin's cloak like a dying standard. Bolton staggered upright, dabbing blood from his eyes. "The lion is felled," he rasped. Ned turned to Arya. "Out. Find Robb. Tell him." He swallowed. "Tell him Winter's jaws closed." Arya nodded and vanished. Robb Stark fought on the courtyard flagstones under a sky pale as milk. A ring of 30 dead men formed grisly petals around him, and Grey Wind, Frey's Lannisters, northern deserters lured by gold. Yet the drive of their swords had begun to falter. Word traveled swift even when tongues were stilled. Somewhere men sensed their lord's heartbeat falter. A trumpet blared from the east tower's balcony. Bolton appeared, shirt crimson at the flank but sword raised. He shouted, voice magnified by frost-hardened air. "Tywin is dead. Wolves hold the hall." A hush so deep it drowned the keening of wind settled. Lannister men exchanged glances. Some disbelief, others raw shock. Robb seized the silence. Yield and be fed. Fight and be food for crows. The lion bannermen nearest him gazed toward their tents beyond the walls where comrades still slumbered in ignorance. The resolve slipped like thaw. A senior sergeant flung down his mace. 2 more followed. Then a cascade. Helms clanged onto stone, shields dropped, knees bent. A handful of diehards cursed oaths and rushed. Grey Wind tore out a throat here. Robb carved a path there. The last shriek faded. Gates thundered as Stark pikemen slammed the portcullis closed. Outside, 20,000 Lannister souls woke to morning drums, finding gates shut, and banners of direwolf and trout flying from the ramparts where last night the lion roared. Within the butchered antechamber, Ned knelt over Tywin's body. In the hush he felt only fatigue. Bone deep, soul heavy. Bolton watched, expression unreadable. "You slew the richest man in Westeros," he said finally. "Kings will rise to avenge him." "Kings already rise," Ned replied. He cleaned his sword on Tywin's cloak. "We must meet them." Footsteps. Catelyn entered with Sansa at her heel, both pale but uninjured. When Catelyn saw Jaime sprawled, Tywin felled. Bolton bleeding. Something melted in her shoulders. Tears came silent. She looked to Ned. Words failed. The life they had shared before Red Keeps, before broken vows, lay between them like an ocean. Yet in her eyes he read pride and a grief only a mother could grasp. Sansa knelt by Jaime's body, lips moving, perhaps a prayer for mercy even to monsters. Ned touched her hair. She flinched but did not draw away. Behind them, Bolton pressed linen to his brow. "Old Lion's camp will not yield without a show," he warned. "They'll parley," Ned said. "They've no head, no air on the field." "No head, aye," Bolton answered. "But a lion still has claws. Sir Kevan will command, and Kevan's a steadier butcher than Jaime ever was." "Down." Ned rose. "Then we send his butcher a feast of silver tongues." He glanced to the corner where the parchment treaties lay unsigned by Robb. With Tywin dead, they mattered less, yet their ink spoke advantage. "Catelyn?" "Scribe awake. Maester Vyman waits with quill." She replied, "Summon him. We draft terms for Kevan. Withdraw beyond the Blackwater. Ransom your dead. Swear no further claim." Bolton chuckled, wiping crimson fingertips. "Hell bargain but caution. Lannister gold buys many knives, including northern ones." "Da." Ned met his gaze. "Not enough to buy winter." Bolton inclined his head, ambiguous. Snow thickened by the hour. The twins' courtyards turned white, save where blood pooled in frozen mirrors of garnet. Blackfish organized the living into lines. Captives escorted to cellars, wounded to makeshift infirmary, volunteers to the ramparts. Edmure rode circuits on a borrowed destrier, checking the repaired winch machines atop the northern barbican. Spears bristled like pine along every wall. Outside, the Lannister host roused to a dawn of disbelief. Sir Kevan indeed took command, his face gray as old ash. He formed units into crescent defense, catapults dragged forward. But he did not order assault. Instead, he sent a white flag rider. Banners of truce met wind. Robb stood with Ned atop the mid-bridge parapet to receive the envoy. The man bore 3 scrolls: demand for Tywin's body, confirmation of Jaime's fate, proof of fair guest right, and call for counsel. Ned signed the second with Tywin's own ring, affixed wax to parchment with its impression. He offered the envoy 3 barrels of salted beef and a wagon of Frey bread. Gift for the hungry. Tell Sir Kevin, Ned added. The longer he camps in winter, the more his men starve. We can feed them now, not later. The envoy rode back, banners trailing. By noon, a new parley was scheduled. Evening found Ned in the Godswood the twins. Nothing more than a narrow court of brick. One whitewashed trunk, crimson leaves clinging stubbornly against snow. He washed Tywin's blood from his sword in the icy basin below the heart face. Water glassed his reflection. Hair matted, eyes ringed dark as midnight ravens. Age etched deeper. A rustle behind, Arya entered. She carried needle, but no bow. Cheeks reddened by cold air and something like wonder. Did the old gods see? She asked. They see, Ned said. Whether they judge, we might never know. She stepped beside him, gaze lowering to the water. I thought I'd feel. The list was always about his house. She shrugged. But I'm not finished. Nor should you be. He laid a hand on her shoulder. You're 13 summers. Lists will lengthen, shorten. But you, he squeezed lightly. You must choose whether vengeance owns you or you own it. She nodded, quiet. They walked back toward the keep as dusk settled violet over white fields. Robb awaited on the bridge, parchment in glove, gray wind seated at his heel. Kevin yields, he said as they approached. He asks 3 days to bury dead and march south. He leaves gold enough to ransom prisoners. He wants his uncle Tygett and sister cousins released. They were granted bread and salt, Ned said. They ride at dawn. Robb exhaled, mist curling. Then winter is ours. For now. Ned eyed distant tree line where crows circled rising wood smoke. South still holds dragons in flesh or desire. East holds sellswords. North holds death in forms we scarce remember. But yes, tonight, the House of Lions sleeps headless. He looked at Robb then, his sun grown harder than ice, yet warm in the eyes still, and felt a surge of pride edged by sorrow. Your mother wants counsel. Plans for the Riverlands, for Winterfell. Mentorwine. We'll plan, Robb promised, after we sing the names of our dead. He knelt to scratch gray wind and added, and after we feast the living. They've earned meat and mead. Ned managed a weary smile. Aye, meat and mead. And a song of winter turned. They went inside, leaving footprints that filled quickly with new snow. 3 days later, the lions marched. Ned watched from the barbican as Kevin's column trudged south. Banners furled in black silk. No horns, no drums. Silent, but for the creak of wagons carrying Tywin's bier and Jaime's iron coffin. Snow fell in languid spirals, cloaking them. The world seemed to hold its breath. When last helm vanished beyond the horizon bruise, Ned turned to his kin and bannermen gathered on the wall. Catelyn, Robb, Arya, Sansa, Blackfish, Bolton stitched but standing, Harma Dogshead leaning on a borrowed spear. Winter has begun, Ned said, voice carrying over the hush. Not the season born of sky, but the reckoning we bring upon those who forget the cost of broken oaths. We are not done. We march to River Run, to Moat Cailin, to Winterfell. We'll mend what was tore. We'll guard against what stirs beyond the wall. He paused, letting eyes meet each face, some scarred, some too young for scars, each shining with new resolve. We are Starks, the North remembers. From the wood beyond, a lone direwolf howled. Gray wind answered, deep and rolling. Others took up the cry, distant, haunting. A chorus older than castles. Snow kept falling, soft as ashes, blanketing bloodstains, broken shields. The twin keeps themselves. Under that pale shroud the great river flowed on, cold and patient, carrying word of the night the red wedding turned upon itself, and the lion's grip was severed in a single winter's dawn. And across Westeros, ravens beat black wings toward every hall and holdfast, bearing a simple truth. The North has awakened, her wolf song risen, and winter walks south with a sword in hand.